They say trust is the foundation of any relationship. For me, trust wasn't just a foundation, it was everything. For 5 years, I lived a life that seemed like it was carved from the pages of a love story. Olivia, my wife, wasn't just my partner, she was my best friend, my confidant, the person I thought I knew better than anyone else in the world. We built a life together in a small, peaceful suburb just outside Chicago. Our home wasn't extravagant, but it was ours, a 2-story house with beige walls, wide windows that let in the morning sun, and a backyard where we spent countless weekends grilling, laughing, and sharing quiet moments under the stars. It was the kind of life I'd always dreamed of. Olivia was everything I could have asked for in a partner. She was smart, compassionate, and driven. Her job in marketing kept her busy, but she always found time for us, date nights, Sunday mornings with coffee on the porch, even lazy afternoons binge-watching shows we both pretended to like more than we did. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the life everyone hopes for. For 5 years, I didn't question a thing. But sometimes, the things we don't question are the ones that leave us blindsided. It was a normal weekday when Olivia told me she'd be traveling for a work conference in Denver. It didn't seem unusual, her company often sent her to these kinds of events. She explained it with the kind of nonchalance you'd expect, just a few days. Some presentations, networking, nothing too exciting. I helped her pack the night before, watching as she folded her clothes neatly into her suitcase. Her favorite burgundy dress, the one she wore to work functions, went in first. Then the navy blouse I'd complimented just a week earlier. I handed her her travel toiletries, joking about how she always forgot to pack them. She laughed, kissed me on the cheek, and thanked me for being so thoughtful. The next morning, I stood by the window, watching as the cab pulled up to the driveway. Olivia loaded her suitcase into the trunk, then turned back to wave at me. Her smile was warm, familiar, comforting. I waved back, feeling a small twinge of something I couldn't name, a faint unease that I quickly brushed aside. She was gone before I knew it, and the house felt quiet, almost too quiet. I remember walking into the kitchen to grab a cup of coffee, glancing at the stack of mail on the counter. Among the envelopes was a brochure for the conference Olivia mentioned. I picked it up, flipping through it idly, reading the schedule of workshops and keynote speakers. It all seemed legitimate, exactly what she'd described. And yet, something felt off. It wasn't a loud feeling. It wasn't even clear. Just a small, nagging thought that didn't make sense. Olivia and I had never had secrets, not in 5 years. There was no reason to doubt her, no reason to feel the creeping unease that settled in the back of my mind. So, I ignored it. That evening, I got a text message. It was from Alex. To say I was surprised would be an understatement. Alex was someone I hadn't heard from in years. He was my best friend back in college, a guy I trusted like a brother. But life happened. We drifted apart, and I hadn't thought about him in a long time. The message was short, almost casual. Hey, James. Long time, no talk. We need to talk about Olivia. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe Alex had meant to message someone else. Or maybe it was some kind of elaborate prank. But the words stuck with me. We need to talk about Olivia. I stared at the screen for what felt like forever, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. A part of me didn't want to respond. A part of me wanted to ignore it, dismiss it as nothing. But the rest of me couldn't let it go. I typed back, trying to keep my tone neutral. Hey, Alex. What's this about? His reply came almost instantly. It's something I think you need to know. Let's talk. Are you free tomorrow? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the message in my mind. What could Alex possibly have to tell me about Olivia? They didn't know each other, as far as I was aware. Or did they? The questions swirled in my head, each one heavier than the last. I told myself I was overthinking. Olivia had given me no reason to doubt her. Alex was probably mistaken, or confused, or something. But the unease wouldn't leave. It was the kind of feeling that starts small and grows louder the more you try to ignore it. By morning, I knew I had to meet Alex. I needed answers, even if I wasn't ready for what they might be. What Alex told me the next day would change everything I thought I knew about my marriage. About Olivia. About myself. Before we dive deeper into this story today, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying this journey, and give this video thumbs up. Your support energized us for sharing these intimate stories, and remember to turn on notifications so you won't miss any future episodes. Our life in Chicago was everything I could have hoped for. Olivia and I had carved out a small corner of the world that felt safe, predictable, and filled with love. Our home, a modest two-story house tucked away on a quiet suburban street, was our sanctuary. The walls were painted a soft beige, the kind of neutral color Olivia said would never go out of style. Family photos lined the shelves and mantel, capturing moments from our wedding day, vacations, and birthdays. The scent of freshly brewed coffee lingered in the mornings, mingling with the faint citrus of her favorite cleaning spray. Evenings were my favorite. Olivia loved humming while she cooked dinner, sometimes singing old songs she remembered from childhood. I'd sit on the couch with a book, pretending to read while secretly watching her. On weekends, we'd string up fairy lights in the backyard and host friends for barbecue dinners. Those were the nights we'd laugh the hardest, surrounded by the warmth of good company and the glow of twinkling lights overhead. For 5 years, this was our life. And I thought we were unbreakable. Olivia was in marketing, and she loved her job. I used to tease her about how enthusiastic she'd get over product launches or campaign strategies. She'd talk about branding with the kind of passion most people reserved for their hobbies. I worked in finance, a more buttoned-up profession, but one that gave me stability, and more importantly, time for us. Then, one day, Olivia casually mentioned a work conference. It was a week-long event in Denver, a chance to meet industry leaders, learn new trends, network. She explained it with her usual excitement, and I didn't think twice about it. I remember her standing in the doorway of our kitchen, wearing that navy blouse she loved. She leaned against the counter, her eyes lighting up as she talked about the keynote speakers and breakout sessions. I could see how much she was looking forward to it. "It's just a few days," she said, giving me that warm smile of hers. "Nothing too exciting, but I'll bring you back one of those little souvenirs you like." "You mean the ones I toss in a drawer and forget about?" I teased. She laughed, playfully swatting my arm. That night, we packed her suitcase together. It was a little tradition of ours. I'd hand her the clothes, and she'd fold them neatly into the case. The burgundy dress went in first, the one she always wore to professional events. Then her favorite navy blazer, some blouses, and a pair of heels. I grabbed her travel toiletries from the bathroom, joking that she'd forget them if I didn't. She laughed, kissed me on the cheek, and thanked me. That's what I remember most, her laughter, her smile, the way she seemed completely herself. The next morning, I stood by the window as the cab pulled up. Olivia wheeled her suitcase down the driveway, her stride confident and unhurried. She turned back to wave at me, her smile as familiar as ever. I waved back, sipping my coffee as the car disappeared down the street. The house felt quieter than usual. Still, I didn't think much of it. It was just a week. She'd be back soon. Click subscribe and remember to turn on notifications so you won't miss any future episodes. In Denver, Olivia checked into her hotel just as she said she would. It was a polished, modern place, the kind of upscale accommodation her company always arranged. The sleek marble floors reflected the overhead lights, and the air smelled faintly of citrus and fresh linen. She walked to the desk, checked in, and took the elevator to her room. Her day passed as expected: sessions, speakers, and networking events. By all accounts, everything appeared normal. But as the sun began to set, Olivia's plans for the evening veered far from the conference itinerary. That night, she stepped out into the crisp Denver air and made her way to a jazz bar a few blocks from her hotel. It wasn't the kind of place you'd associate with work trips: dimly lit, intimate, with a small stage for live music. The mahogany tables gleamed under the soft amber glow of the overhead lights, and the air buzzed with the low hum of a saxophone. She walked in, scanning the room, until her eyes landed on a man seated at a table in the far corner. He was waiting for her. I can only imagine what that moment felt like for both of them. Alex, leaning back in his chair, exuding confidence. Olivia, hesitating for just a second before walking over to him. He stood as she approached, offering a faint smile. "Liv, still as beautiful as the day we met." "Alex, this isn't what you think. I'm here for closure." Closure. That's what she called it. But Alex's expression didn't change. He gestured to the chair across from him, and Olivia sat down. For a while, it was just conversation. They talked about their lives, about the years that had passed since their divorce. Alex asked her questions I'll never know the answers to, questions about our life together, about me. Olivia answered, her voice low, careful, as though choosing each word with precision. But as the minutes turned into hours, the line between past and present began to blur. The jazz band played softly in the background, filling the silences between their words. Alex ordered wine, and Olivia didn't refuse. By the second glass, their laughter started to sound different, softer, more familiar. By the third, they weren't just reminiscing anymore. At some point during that evening, Alex made a decision. He reached for his phone, angling it subtly, and pressed record. The video doesn't just show them sitting at that table. It captures everything: the way Olivia leaned in when she laughed, the way her hand brushed against his when she reached for her glass. And later, it shows far more than that. Alex wasn't looking for closure. He was looking for something else. He knew exactly what he was doing. Every word he spoke, every gesture, every carefully placed smile, it was all part of his plan. And Olivia, she let it happen. By the end of the night, Alex had everything he needed. The evidence. The proof. And he couldn't wait to use it. It was an ordinary afternoon. I was sitting at my desk, the Chicago skyline stretching out behind me through the wide office windows. My desk was tidy, as always, just a few folders, my laptop, a cup of coffee growing colder by the minute. The sound of my phone buzzing pulled me out of whatever spreadsheet I'd been lost in. I glanced at the screen, expecting the usual: a work email, maybe a message from Olivia letting me know how the conference was going. Instead, I saw a name I hadn't thought about in years. Alex. For a second, I just stared at it. My mind raced, trying to piece together why he'd be reaching out after all this time. We hadn't spoken in what? 7, 8 years? Not since college, not since he moved away and we drifted apart. The message was short. "We need to talk about Olivia." I reread it, once, twice, 3 times, as if the meaning would change. My stomach tightened, that small twinge of unease I'd ignored when Olivia left now growing louder. What did he mean, about Olivia? I typed back a response, keeping it simple. "Hey, Alex. What's this about?" The reply came almost immediately. "It's something I think you need to know. Can we meet? Tomorrow?" I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to think. Alex? Talking about Olivia? It made no sense. They didn't know each other, at least, not as far as I was aware. My first instinct was to ignore it, to pretend the message never came. but something inside me wouldn't let it go. Click subscribe and remember to turn on notifications so you won't miss any future episodes. The next day, I walked into a small cafe downtown. It was one of those quiet, hole-in-the-wall places where people go to get work done or have conversations they don't want overheard. Alex was already there, sitting at a corner table with a coffee cup in front of him. He looked older. A little more weathered than I remembered, but his eyes still had that same intensity they always did. He stood as I approached, offering a handshake that felt formal, almost hesitant. "James. It's been a while." "Yeah, it has. So, what's this about?" He motioned for me to sit, and I did, the wooden chair creaking slightly as I settled in. For a moment, Alex didn't say anything. He just looked at me, as if trying to figure out how to start. Then he reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out his phone, and slid it across the table toward me. "Watch this," he said. I pressed play. The screen showed a dimly lit room. At first, it was hard to make out the details: the soft amber glow of a jazz bar, the blurred outlines of two people sitting at a table. But as the video came into focus, I felt my chest tighten. It was Olivia. She was laughing, leaning toward the man across from her. Alex. The video wasn't long, maybe 30 seconds, but it didn't need to be. It showed enough. The way she smiled at him, the way her hand brushed against his, the closeness between them, it was all there. And then the screen went black. What is this? No. This can't be real. I hate to do this, James. But you deserve to know the truth. She came to see me. She reached out to me. I didn't plan this. My mind was racing, trying to process what I'd just seen. The questions hit me all at once. Why didn't she tell me she knew Alex? How long had this been going on? Was this just one night, or something more? I looked at Alex, searching for answers, for some kind of explanation that would make this all make sense. "I thought you should know," he said, his voice low. "You deserve better than this, James." I pushed the phone back across the table, my hands shaking. For the first time in 5 years, I didn't know what to believe. I drove to Emily's studio that afternoon, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My thoughts raced as I tried to piece together everything I'd learned. Olivia's betrayal was one thing. But Alex? How did he fit into all this? Emily had to know something. She was Olivia's sister, her confidant. If anyone could give me answers, it was her. When I walked into her studio, the smell of paint and turpentine hit me immediately. The space was chaotic, cluttered with half-finished canvases leaning against the walls. Streaks of color splattered the wooden floor, and brushes were scattered across a workbench. Emily was in the middle of working on something, her back turned to me. Click subscribe and remember to turn on notifications so you won't miss any future episodes. She spun around, startled, wiping her hands on a paint-stained apron. When she saw the look on my face, her expression shifted from surprise to concern. "Did you know about this? About Olivia and Alex? Did you know she was hiding her past from me?" "James, what are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone and opened the video Alex had shown me. I didn't want to watch it again, but I needed her to see it. I placed the phone on the workbench and pressed play. She watched in silence, her face paling as the seconds ticked by. When it ended, she looked up at me, tears welling in her eyes. "How long have you known, Emily? How long have you been covering for her?" I didn't think it would come to this. I thought she was over him, James. She told me she'd moved on. Her voice cracked as she spoke, but it didn't soften the blow. Emily knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to know that Olivia had lied to me for years. She begged me not to act impulsively, but I couldn't hear her anymore. The anger, the hurt, it drowned out everything else. I left the studio without another word, slamming the door behind me. Later that evening, Olivia returned home. I was sitting in the living room, waiting for her. The lights were dim, the room silent except for the faint buzz of the ceiling fan. When the door unlocked, I didn't move. I didn't speak. She stepped inside, pulling her suitcase behind her, smiling as she always did when she came home. That smile faded the moment she saw me. "James? You're home early." Don't. Just don't." She froze, her eyes darting to the coffee table where my phone sat, the screen dark but ready. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers trembled slightly as she set down her bag. I reached for the phone and pressed play. The video filled the silence. Olivia's laughter. Her hand brushing Alex's. The image of them together in that dimly lit bar. She stood there, staring at the screen, her face draining of color. "James, I can explain." "Explain?" "You lied. About Alex. About everything. Do you even know what this has done to me? To us?" She tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Tears streamed down her face, but I couldn't look at her anymore. The room, once filled with warmth and love, now felt cold, suffocating. The walls that had seen our happiest moments now stood witness to the ugliest truth of all, that the life I thought we'd built together had been a lie. Click subscribe and remember to turn on notifications so you won't miss any future episodes. I don't remember what I said next. Maybe I yelled. Maybe I stayed silent. All I remember is the look in her eyes, fear, regret, guilt. And yet, it wasn't enough. It couldn't undo what had been done. By the time I left the room, I knew things would never be the same. Not for me. Not for us. Not ever. Days passed after the confrontation. Days that felt like years. The silence in our house was unbearable, and every corner reminded me of what we'd lost, or maybe, what had never truly been there. I spent those days replaying everything in my mind. The words Olivia said, or didn't say. The things I'd missed over the years, the little signs I'd brushed off as nothing. It was all so clear now, but clarity didn't bring peace. It just brought more questions. I thought knowing the truth would make things easier. That it would give me closure. But all it did was leave me feeling hollow. What was I supposed to do with this knowledge? How do you move forward when the person you trusted most has broken you? One morning, before the city had fully woken up, I found myself by Lake Michigan. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the water in hues of gold and soft pink. The air was cool, crisp, carrying with it the smell of the lake. I sat on a bench overlooking the water, my phone clutched in my hand. The video was still on the screen, paused at the exact moment I'd stopped watching it last. Olivia's face, frozen in a moment of laughter. Alex, leaning in, his eyes locked on hers. I stared at it for what felt like hours, the light from the screen growing dimmer as the sun climbed higher. My thumb hovered over the play button, but I couldn't bring myself to press it. I didn't need to see it again. I didn't need to carry this with me any longer. I swiped to delete the video. The screen went blank, taking with it the weight I'd been carrying since the moment I saw it. And then, I stood up. The lake stretched out before me, endless and calm. The world felt so much bigger than my pain, so much more expansive than the life I thought I'd lost. Without thinking, I tossed my phone into the water. It arced through the air, catching the morning light before plunging into the lake. The splash echoed in the quiet, ripples spreading outward in ever-widening circles. For the first time in days, I felt still. Sometimes, closure isn't about getting answers. It's not about holding on to the pain or trying to make sense of it all. Sometimes, it's about letting go. Letting go of the questions. The anger. The betrayal. The person you thought they were. And finding a way to move forward, even when you don't know where forward is. If your world fell apart like mine did, could you let go? Or would you hold on, hoping for answers that may never come? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this, stories of love, loss, and the strength to keep going.